Well, good morning and welcome to the discussion, The Value of Black Fathers. We want to thank you for participating. I'm Eli Williams, president and founder of Urban Light Ministries and author of the book, Father Love, the powerful resource every child needs. It is my privilege to serve as host and moderator this morning. Today's conversation is presented by Gammon House Incorporated. The historic Gammon House in Springfield, Ohio, is one of only 3 existing Ohio stops on the Underground Railroad owned by a free person of color. Learn more at visiting gammonhouseoh.org. And by Urban Light Ministries, founded in 1995, serving fathers in Springfield and the Dayton-Miami Valley region since 2006. On the web at urbanlight.org. This program is funded by a grant from Ohio Commission on Fatherhood during what Governor Mike DeWine has declared Responsible Fatherhood Month. To listen to many so-called experts, politicians, and the media, one would believe that Black fatherhood is dead. Is that true? If not, why not? What are the effects of the perpetuation of such a myth? As we approach Father's Day, it is especially a great time to honor fathers, all good fathers, and to celebrate them for what they contribute to their children, families, and communities. Our presenters this morning are fatherhood experts Calvin Williams, Glenn Harris, and Muqit Sabur. We thank them for participating. We'll hear from each of them in a moment. First, know that there is an opportunity for you to ask questions of our panelists. Simply open the chat feature and register your questions there, and we will present as many of them as we can. Now let's introduce our first panelist. First, Glenn Harris. Glenn is an administrative director of prevention. As such, he's responsible for gender-based violence prevention, training, and support. His work in Columbus is geared toward creating and supporting communities where all people can live free of violence within their relationships. That includes establishing healthier definitions of masculinity and healthier norms surrounding gender-based violence. Glenn's primary role is engaging men and boys in domestic and sexual violence prevention with Ohio Men's Action Network, OMAN. He facilitates various conversations with stakeholders across Ohio. Glenn's background includes working in the arenas of responsible fatherhood, ex-offender reentry, and youth mentoring. He's a graduate of Otterbein University with a bachelor's degree in business administration and religion. Glenn is a current board member of Ohio Practitioners Network for Fathers and Families, or OPNFF. Glenn, thank you for being a part of this important conversation. Would you please start with a brief personal or professional fatherhood story?
Absolutely, Eli. I got into this field, I got into this work due to my own personal journey. My father was incarcerated during my teenage years from the time I was 14 to 22. I had my first son at 19. Having that first son, I was a little confused, didn't really know, exactly what a father was. My father wasn't in the home, and then once incarceration happened, contact with him was minimal. One of the memories I can remember is my grandmother taking me to visit my father inside the institution. And I'll never forget the echo of those doors slamming shut. And I can remember at 14 years old, kind of like, no, you'll never see me, in this environment. But to see my father caged like that was very traumatic for me at an early age. I can remember going to my grandfather, kind of asking him like, I don't really know what this fatherhood thing is all about. Mine hasn't really been around. And he just kind of looks at me and he kind of goes, do everything your father didn't do. And that in itself, at the time, I didn't really understand it. I didn't grasp it. But as I grow older in my years, as I have additional children, I absolutely get it. It's being a part of their lives, it's being part of the academic process, being part of the, medical visits and all the aspects of, of our children's life, being active and being involved. So it's been a pleasure and it's been a journey working alongside the Ohio Practitioners Network for Fathers and Family, the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood, and serving fathers all throughout the state. It has been a journey and it has definitely been a pleasure.
Well, thanks for that inspiring story, Glenn. We appreciate that.
Thank
Now,
you.
would you please talk to us on this topic, the value of Black fathers? What is your own perspective?
Absolutely. First and foremost is my personal perspective, my personal experience working in fatherhood for the past 15, 20 years, starting off with the Columbus Urban League and serving the African-American community here in Columbus, Ohio. When I originally set off, I was told that guys wouldn't show up. Black men just weren't interested in being dads. And come to find out, I put some marketing out there, give guys some opportunities. And we had lines forming up at the Urban League for guys wanting to be a part of this program, wanting to be, more responsible, more active involved in their children's lives. And of course, we use, different incentives, whether it be help with child support or help with different legal processes, help getting a job. But all these things were just small barriers that were impediments to fathers being the type of dads that they wanted to be. And they just needed a little help getting over those hurdles. The second part is, getting into this field, getting into this work, you start to open your eyes and watch how media depicts Black fatherhood. And as you look at it, throughout history, throughout childhood, growing up, I can think of countless of TV shows, movies that depicted, white men being fathers. But when you think about that same scenario, you think about Black fathers, that list is very limited. Probably starts with Dr. Huxtable, probably goes on to, some small fatherhood characters that we've seen in itty bitty roles. But for the most part, media projects us as being absent, being uninterested in being fathers, being incarcerated, and all the different, social ills we see in the African American community that have, oftentimes eliminated, Black father from the family. A lot of what we see is kind of, myth. It's unfortunate, but I was doing some research just in preparation for this conversation, and I came across this report from 1965 called "The Negro Family: The Case for National Action," and this was done under Lyndon B. Johnson's tenure. And unfortunately, what they did is they started looking at data that did not depict, the Black man's involvement in the family. So you're looking at marriage statistics. Obviously we're not getting married at the same rates as what we used to. We're looking at census data that depicts, single parent households. A father may not be in that home. And we're looking at divorce data. All these different statistics that paint a picture, and you can kind of direct those statistics to, tell whatever story you want to tell. However, at the end of the day, I would be victim to those statistics. I've got 3 boys. I don't live in the home with my boys, but I'm actively involved. I was not married to mom, but I'm actively involved. I'm part of the school process. I'm part of the medical process. So, that data, those statistics that, has told this, unfortunate lie about our Black family is just not true. It's just unfortunately just not true.
Yeah, those numbers can be very deceptive. Technically, a father who is not living in the home is kind of invisible in those
Absolutely.
stats. And even fathers who are in the home, but those biological children are not theirs, but they're playing the father role. They are also invisible because they're not stepfathers. Stepfathers are married to the mother. And so as a result, those numbers are skewed. And whereas marriage is better, we've got to recognize that a man who is being a father for children, even those who are not his own, should be counted, should be respected, should be supported. So thank you so much, Glenn, for your comments. Our second speaker today is Muqit Sabur. He is founder and leader of the Center for Fatherhood and Family Dynamics. Muqit has worked in the area of fathers, families, men, and relationships for more than 25 years and created CFFD in 2009 to continue his work. CFFD delivers training, coaching, and group facilitation to those seeking to enhance the relationships with which they are a part. Muqit has served as the founding president of Ohio Practitioners Network for Fathers and Families, leading the organization through its developmental stages. Continuing his commitment to community and families, Muqit is co-founder and current president of the Neighborhood Leadership Institute of Cleveland, Ohio, which has trained nearly 1,000 Ohio residents to develop their leadership skills and serve in their communities. The author, The Art of Transformation, a guide for facilitating fathers groups, and major contributor to a guide for developing fatherhood programs. He is a polarity thinking management consultant, a Gestalt trained intervener, and life coach. He is the father of 5 adult children and the grandfather of 6, the oldest of whom is 7. Muqit, thank you so much for being a part of this important conversation. Would you please start with a brief personal or professional fatherhood story?
Boy. My son, who's the youngest of the brood, lives in New York City and recently visited. He left about a week ago, stayed for a week, and had the opportunity to have I guess you call it a man-to-man conversation, but an adult male to adult male conversation. And the conversation got around to his early experiences with me as a father. And it was very, I should say, revealing in terms of what his view was. And I think my first response was a reaction, as they say, snap my head back. But as I began to listen, which was his major complaint, I never listened to him. I started to filter that conversation into what I try to do with other fathers in groups. And that, ironically, is the thing that's what I emphasize. You have to be able to listen and connect with your children. So that was the lesson brought home for me.
We never stop learning, do we?
No, we don't. And that's very important.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much for that very transparent expose.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
It was painful, but I got through it anyway. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Excellent. So let's talk about the value of Black fathers. This is Father's Day weekend. We'll be celebrating fatherhood tomorrow. And I thought that this was an appropriate topic, seeing that so often there are misconceptions about fatherhood in general, but Black fatherhoods in particular. So give us your view.
Well, that's a pretty broad and deep subject, but I'll try to hit some high points. I think that the Black fathers are, particularly in today's age, I think it was my father's experience was fraught with a lot of societal kinds of challenges that were kind of more overt than what a Black father today has to deal with. There certainly are overt challenges to fatherhood, to Black men generally, but especially to fathers. And they're far more complex, I think, today, based on, and I say that as a result of just knowing what some of the things that my father went through. So I am the repository of not only his father's experiences, but my father's experiences, and I'm hopefully not as overtly, but pass those on to my son and daughters for that matter. But so those, I don't think it's been, in my experience, those issues have not been surfaced or acknowledged generally in the Black fatherhood community, if you will. So I think that the challenges are far more subtle. There's some very overt things, and no question about it, but the challenges that fathers face are far more subtle, I think, than in my father's day.
Say more about that. What are some of the challenges to African-American fathers today that perhaps existed before, but there were so many other more overt issues kind of overshadowed, but nevertheless are very, very difficult challenges for fathers today?
One example that comes to mind is the whole sense of community. You've heard the old proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. And in my short time on this planet, I have experienced that to some degree. And without really knowing, naming it, but just reflecting on my experiences, there was a community that surrounded and supported me and my sisters and what have you. But in my son's age, as an example, there was not as much of that I could see at any rate. And even as he's developing his own identity, I don't see that kind of community that surrounds him. So when he's ready to produce children, I don't know what that's going to look like for him and his. I have granddaughters who have children, but their support comes from their immediate family, if you understand what I'm saying. There's no broader community. The broader community structure is not there. So the Black father has that, I think, that dual challenge to be supported. And in addition to that, I have to be careful here. The social, no, I don't mean social. What I mean is, and I'll just say it out, the governmental structure, the formal structure that is designed to protect families and serve families and what have you, particularly the Black father is the enemy, so to speak, is the outlier in that system, which means that when the Black father wants to engage with his children who may not reside with him, he is, especially in Ohio, has to overcome those outer barriers, which is frustrating, and to get to the inner barriers of the mother-father relationship and the child relationship in order to realize his role in the family. And that can be tiring and frustrating and off-putting.
Do I hear you saying that governmental systems are not supportive of the involvement of the Black father in the children that he doesn't reside with, and often provides barriers that actually exacerbate a situation, which is really tragic when the mother, the parenting partner, is not being cooperative.
That's absolutely, that is exactly what I'm talking about. Especially in Ohio, those challenges and barriers are pretty steep, okay? And they're subtle. Yes. You don't expect to see them, but when you're confronted with them, they are devastating to fathers.
I want to say thank you, Muqit, for opening us up with your insights into the current state of Black fatherhood. And so you'll stay with us, and we'll get back to you after we have heard from Calvin Williams.
Okay.
We're going to go now to our next speaker. He's Calvin Williams. Calvin is the president of Lucian Families Incorporated, a Cincinnati-based company that provides training, program development, and innovation strategies, I should say, different thing, innovation strategies to community-based public and private family-serving organizations. Calvin is a certified lactation counselor. That's interesting. He is also the co-author of and master trainer for PrEP's On My Shoulders, popular fatherhood curriculum. Mr. Williams previously served as the director of fatherhood services for Public Strategies in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Before joining Public Strategies, Mr. Williams was employed as the program director for 2 Cincinnati-based fatherhood programs, Lighthouse Youth Services Real Dads program and the Services United for Mothers, and Adolescents Fatherhood Project. He helped launch the Community Building Institute at Xavier University in Cincinnati, served as the initial co-director there, and is a founding and current board member of OPNFF. Calvin, we're delighted that you're here. We want to thank you for being part of this important conversation. Would you please start with a brief personal or professional fatherhood story of your own?
Sure. Good morning, Eli, and to everybody else on the call. When I'm asked to think of a fatherhood story, it's like a very deep Rolodex. And so I scanning through it real quick, one story jumps up to mind. I raised my son as a co-parent. You know, I was a single father, a co-parenting father, and the child care arrangements between he and his mom were based on his mom's job. She worked really odd hours, worked 60 hours a week, that type of thing. So I had my son just a lot. You know, we didn't have any formal, parenting time order. We just worked it out, but I had him a lot, probably like 70% of the time. And so very, very heavily and deeply involved in raising him. I was a very intentional father. At one point in my life, I was offered a business opportunity through a married couple who had a company that engaged Procter and Gamble. And I went with them to these meetings with Procter and Gamble, where it was really, really likely they were going to get this really big contract with Procter and Gamble. So that happened. The people at Procter and Gamble, for whatever reason, they really warmed up to me and actually told the gentleman, the husband of the couple, that we're really interested in working with you because of him, which was stunning to me. It's like, wow, okay, so whatever impression I made. So they were going to get that contract. And so the idea came up like, wow, why don't we set up a company for Calvin so that he can be a part of this contract. And so it was a huge opportunity, right? Just all the way around. And I remember thinking about it, about whether to take it, how it would impact my life, et cetera. And I was driving from Cincinnati to Columbus, probably to a Ohio Practitioners Network for Fatherhood meeting. And I remember thinking about this opportunity, and I was going over in my head about how it would impact my life with my son. And one thought kind of broke me down into tears that led me to telling those people, no, I cannot do this, right? And that thought, as I was thinking about all the ways that this would impact my time with Aaron, the question came up in my mind, well, who's going to take him to baseball? And for some reason, I started a flood of tears as I came into the understanding that as amazing as this opportunity was, I couldn't take it because I could not spare 1 minute away from my son in terms of what we already had going on and how I was caring for him. And that was just a deep moment for me. And I still wonder why was I crying, right? And as far as I can figure, it was just the depth and the level and love and commitment to that boy. And it wasn't a hard decision, but it was deep, right? I'm turning down some pretty lucrative stuff, potentially lucrative stuff, because nobody's going to be able to take my kid to baseball. So that was a deep moment for me. One of tens of thousands in my journey as a father. Eli, I listened to your question or your statement at the beginning about fatherhood being dead, or Black fathers. Black fatherhood is dead. On the ground in the communities where I work, it's anything but that. And so we think about marriage rates, we think about rates of homes where kids aren't sleeping with their biological father, which has been the bellwether data point for fatherhood for decades. But when you work in community and work with fathers and families, you see amazing examples of the value of Black fathers. Just this week at Hamilton County Job and Family Services, where I'm the fatherhood coordinator, a children's services worker called me and said, I have a young man, 27 years old, who has no children, but the children that are involved in the case with the mom, we are temporarily placing these 3 children, I'm sorry, with this young man. He's 27 years old. He's their uncle, but he has no kids. And she said, we're looking at permanent placement as well. But I just wanted to touch base with you as the father coordinator to see what services you could offer him. The idea of a 27-year-old man who has no children, is not a biological father, and is going to take on 3 children, right? This is what's happening in our community. These types of things are what's happening in our communities that more than show the value of Black fathers. Fathers are stepping up and stepping into fatherhood through marriage, through cohabiting relationships, through adoption, through the foster care system. And in the case like I just described, just as caring male adults who have the instinct to engage with children, stay with children, nurture and raise children. So the value of Black fathers is extensive throughout our community, in the sense that we have fathers who are together with the mother of their child, but there are so many men stepping up and stepping into fatherhood in so many ways. And it's hard to quantify the impact of that in a particular community, because nobody's looking at it that way, right? You know, the whole narrative that Black fathers are either missing or for reasons that they don't want to be involved with the kids at all, or they just walked away. That old narrative still holds strength, but the tide is changing largely because of the work that we do here in Ohio and other places around the country. Interestingly, this week, 2 different women I spoke with said, I get it now. And what they were referring to, one of them had a boyfriend who has a boyfriend who's not seen his daughter from another woman in a month. The other woman attended a court hearing with her younger brother as he was trying to get custody of his kids. The woman who was attending the court hearing, I talked to her on the phone during the court process. I guess they had a break or she had to leave the courtroom. And her younger brother asked her to call me because he needed some support. And so she called me and she said, you know, being in this courtroom today, my eyes are completely open now into all the ways that the system prevents Black men from being the fathers that they want to be. And then the other woman told me about the one who had her boyfriend, whose boyfriend hasn't seen his daughter in a month, said, now I get it, right? So all of our efforts promoting and supporting and facilitating good fatherhood have paid off. I mean, it's important to me when women start to understand the barriers to Black men being the fathers they want to be. And just another example of that is Sigma Gamma Rho sorority. It's a sorority. They have nothing to do with men. It's not a part of their mission. They don't provide or create initiatives for men and fathers. But the president of the local chapter here in Cincinnati called me about 6 months ago. And she said, for some reason, fatherhood was placed on my heart. And I'm telling myself, well, our sorority doesn't have anything to do with this. I don't know what this is. She was telling me the story as she was dealing with that. And she says, and it wouldn't let go, right? And so she started searching around, I guess, trying to following this feeling, this urging. And she came across the Fatherhood Collaborative and me. So she called me and she said, this feeling, this connection, this energy in me about fathers and fatherhood is so strong. I've decided that the Sigma Gamma Rho sorority wants to do a fundraiser for the Fatherhood Collaborative of Hamilton County, right? And we don't want a dime. We just want to put on an event that hopefully will become an annual event just for the Fatherhood Collaborative of Hamilton County. So again, here's a women's organization and Black women, these 2 sisters who were president and vice president of the local chapter, who really fell into fatherhood and are ready to stand up and speak to the value of the need for and the power of Black fathers in our families' lives. So we see it every day in our work. We see it in how we engage fathers, how we engage other organizations, helping them open their eyes more and more to being better at engaging, serving, and supporting fathers. And so because of these efforts, the value of Black fathers, not from a national research perspective, but when you look in local communities, the value of Black fathers is high, right? Most people know and understand that not only are fathers essential, but more and more people are understanding that fathers are there, they're present. They haven't gone anywhere. That myth is simply not true. And most of the time, Black fathers with biological children are also fathering or being primary caring adults in the lives of other children, family and non-family. And so I would say Black fathers are doing double and triple duty out here based on their pure natural instinct and desire to care for and be a part of the development of children, and not only in their families, but in their communities. So the value's there.
Now, we want to turn our attention to our audience to see if there are any questions or comments. And while you're gathering your thoughts and using the chat to write those, I'll go ahead with a couple. Gentlemen, what are the benefits of fathers, especially Black fathers, all fathers, but especially Black fathers? What are the benefits of their being fully present and actively involved in their children's lives? What are the benefits, especially to children?
Eli, for me, I think I start off with, as in the work I do with men and fathers, is just our role as teachers, teaching the next generation how to, navigate and survive in the world that we live in, especially in today's times, today's current times, in the era of, Black Lives Matter, where we're seeing, situations like a George Floyd and all the different situations that have gone on across the country. Being able to have that conversation with our young people and get them to, understand the history behind that, how we kind of got here, how we overcome some of the things that we're seeing in the world, and then how to best overcome, navigate, and what's the right word? Resilience. That's the word I'm looking for. We bring resilience for all the years of. Calvin talked a second ago about the experience with the young lady in the courts. Our Black men are resilient. I've seen Black men in my fatherhood programs overcome some of the most challenging situations. Multiple children, multiple children's mother, poverty, incarceration, and that list goes on and on and on. Yet and still, they have this desire to be active, involved fathers. And that's difficult sometimes. I mean, when the system has beaten you up and you're fighting things like depression and mental health and things like that, it's hard to look at your kids and be that parent, be that inspiring father that you want to be. And oftentimes, our guys just need a little bit of push, a little bit of assistance. And then also keep in mind, how things like poverty and mass incarceration and things like that have impacted our communities. One of the very first things that, I realized getting into some of the fatherhood work is guys would come to me and was like, man, I just need help seeing my kids. She won't let me see my kids. And I say, well, you've got, as a dad, you've got a right to see your kids. Just go down to court, file for parenting visitation, so on and so forth. And then the look that Black men give you is, if you want me to go down to the courts, like that's a system that has continuously beat us up. Yet you want us to put our trust into that system. So it came a point where, I've got to walk hand in hand with you through those courts to give you confidence that those courts can work, in your favor. It's a very different situation walking into a courtroom when, you're the defendant versus you're, the plaintiff, so to speak. But giving our community that hope, giving our community that guidance has been part of the work that we're doing.
Thank you so very much. Calvin, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when you talk about how fatherhood benefits Black men, a few things come to mind. Hope, dignity, destiny, and purpose. I think that's what fatherhood brings to Black men. And I think that the yearning for that is exacerbated by the tension and the actual trauma of being Black in America, right? And so I think Black fathers tend to double down on what could be potentially, the next generation, double down on being a part of a destiny that's better than theirs, to see their children grow up be better than them. But I think it brings a lot of hope and hope, dignity, destiny and purpose dovetail right off of what Glenn said, in terms of that's why we see fathers who are getting kicked in the teeth by children's services, child support, probation, parole, police, human services, right? But they keep coming back. They keep showing up, keep calling us, keep looking for the next option, for the next thing to do, the next way to maneuver to get to their children. So I think it's that hope, dignity, destiny, and purpose mix that is a benefit to fathers. And listen, evolutionary anthropology underscores this, right? Dr. Anna Manchin is one of my favorite people who talks about this, is that men are wired to be fathers. When they hear the term "I'm pregnant," some neurobiological, neurochemical, and physiological things start to occur. That was set in place by evolution hundreds of thousands of years ago, right? So when men are fathering, men are benefiting themselves. They may not think that cognitively or intellectually, but there's something deep in them that they know that this is not only what I'm supposed to do, I'm going to do it at all costs. And so I think there's a benefit to men when they're engaged in fathering, and conversely, it is a deficit. It is injurious to men when they are denied that internal evolutionary process of being a father to their children.
Very well said.
Eli, if I could take that one step further too.
Go ahead.
Interesting thing just very recently happened, and this is in the last couple of years, but for some reason, society kind of led me to believe that fathering ends when my kid turns 18. And I have a very unique experience to where, you know, my boys are 28, 18, and 8. And I tell you that I have the best relationship with my 28-year-old, that I literally parent him every single day, calling for advice, calling, hey, Dad, this happened. Hey, you know, this happened. You know, we had a situation here in Columbus where a young man was murdered by the police. His name was Casey Goodson, and my son actually mentored that young man in high school. And to get that phone call that day from him and a couple of his peers and say, man, can we do lunch? And like Calvin said, that we're doing double and triple duty. Not only did I parent my son in that lunch period, I, you know, parented a couple of his friends from high school. And that's, to me, is some of that beauty, to be able to say, you know what, here's my experience. This is kind of what I've learned through life. Take this information and, you know, use it to the best of your ability. But I'm so enjoying fatherhood at this age, you know, being able to look at a grown man and kind of almost sit back and marvel at, you know, what he's become.
Excellent. Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about me, but I have a 40-year-old son, and he is always on the phone or coming by, you know, sharing what's going on in his life. It's a joy, really. It's not a chore at all. I believe God put it in men to be parents, forever parents. Okay, we do have a question here, and the very first one we got, let me pull it up here, is from Gregory Johnson. He says, I would like us to define fatherhood and Black fatherhood as a critical parent, in quotes, not a separate perspective, but the big picture of being a parent of value. Who would like to take that?
Yeah, you know, what that makes me think about is what research says about what fathers bring to the lives of children, right? So intellectually, socially, emotionally, fathers have an impact on children. And one of the early fatherhood researchers, Dr. Kyle Pruitt, who wrote the book Father Need, was one of the first researchers to really come out. It was about 20-something years ago. It still resonates with me when he says that fathering, it can be done on many different levels of involvement, right? So there's full involvement, that's fine, but there are other levels of involvement that are equally as beneficial to children as a father who's being fully engaged with that child. But the bottom line is that fathers provide something that's unique, not better than mom, but unique and cannot be replaced. And so that's where the picture of fathers it gets really made is the fact that what they have to offer to that child cannot be provided by anyone else, right?
Absolutely.
And I think also with that is the societal view of, this patriarchal view that we have is, men as breadwinners, and allowing society to paint the picture as men, especially, pertains to Black men with the child support systems and things like that, that is our value to the family. Our value to the family is, the monetary, how we can contribute monetarily to the lives of our children. And all those things that Calvin just mentioned are almost disregarded. And that's oftentimes, even in terms of the courts and the way that we're treated by some of these different systems, we're far more than just, the breadwinner, the financial person to the family. And we bring so much more to the table.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Also, I forget who, I think this was a NBC News science editor. He wrote an article about essentially the machinery, the biological, neurological machinery in fathers that kicks into play once, they hear the words "I'm pregnant," or for some fathers, it doesn't kick in until the actual birth of the child. But his point was that fathers and babies need each other, right? With proximity and interaction, fathers and babies connect and start feeding each other. And so when we see fathers, particularly Black fathers, separated from their children, either at birth or not too long after birth, where for some reason or another, they're getting kicked out, ejected, blocked, denied access to the child. So the things that fathers and babies need from each other, they're not getting. And that, again, that is injury to both father and child.
Thank you both for your comments, and thank you, Gregory, for your question. Here's another one from Cassandra Archie. She says, hello, great information presented. I am Cassandra Archie. I run a program, Fathers at the Education Table. Supports, trains, and provides resources for fathers in collaborating with schools for better educational outcomes for their children. And here's a question. Can you share how you are working with fathers and the educational system?
Yeah, I'll start by saying when it comes to the educational process, fathers will and want to be involved, but you got to make an invitation. I'll share a scenario I had a few years back. We were organizing what we called a Million Father March, and it correlated with the first day of school, where we were trying to get men and fathers all across the community to take their children to school on the first day of school. Well, we sent out letters, and we asked the school to send out letters, to the fathers of all the kids. And what we come to find out, because we were getting very, very little response, that the school was sending out letters that said, to the parents of such and such. Well, we all know that's mom. That mom typically opens that letter. We don't know if that letter is going to be passed off, so on and so forth. So we asked the school to change that strategy and to look, for those men and fathers that were on record, let's be very intentional and directly ask and invite those fathers. For those that may not be on record, let's, give the children an opportunity to invite their dads. Let's give them an opportunity to create their own invitations and draw it up, invite their dads, so on and so forth. So it was intention. We had to be intentional about inviting the men, the fathers into the room. The second thing I would say, and also this goes back to the system, on that very same day, I had a very interesting experience. So I'm out in the community. So I arrived to my son's school kind of late, and he's, in the 8th grade. And they have a new principal that school year. So as I walk in, there's another lady, a white lady, walking into the building. So I hold the door for her, let her go in. She steps up to the counter. She goes, oh yeah, my kids forgot their lunch money. I want to drop off their lunch money. And the secretary, well, who's your kids? And, she tells her kids, she pages the kids down, gives the money, the whole thing goes great. Here I walk in, I say, hey, I wanted to, just touch base with my son. I'm here organizing, a little march, and, I just want to, give him some dap, so on and so forth. They're like, well, who are you? Are you on his parent record? Well, hang on, blah, blah, blah. We got to call mom and make sure. I'm like, well, time out. Like, mom didn't have all these barriers. Mom didn't have all these questions. It was, who are your kids? Let's get them down here. Why are you challenging me this way? Because I want to be active and involved in the life of my children. Even got to the point where I went out to my vehicle and got my parenting visitation orders, like, see, and they dismissed that. Well, we're not attorneys, we're not reading that. And I'm like, are you serious? You're denying me my right at this point. So I think part of it is also educating not just the educational system, but all systems, and making sure that they're not allowing themselves to be a barrier to that parent-child relationship.
Yeah, and I'll add that I think schools who are interested in working with fathers, who are interested in inviting and getting fathers more engaged, have to start by checking out their own biases about fathers and fatherhood. And those biases are likely connected to the staff at the school's own experience with their own father. So I think that needs to be flushed out first. If I'm a school, if I'm a principal, if I'm a leader, I want to gather my staff and my team, and I want to hear about your fatherhood stories, right? I want to hear what type of spirit of fatherhood is in the room here, and then we can go into checking our biases, right? Are there biases that are preventing us from engaging, treating, talking to, reaching out to fathers in the ways that we should?
I'll add that here in Columbus, a few years back, we started what we call Donuts with Dads. And dads show up. That's their opportunity to be active, involved, meet the teachers. And again, it's about being very intentional about, inviting dad to the building, inviting dad to that process. Also, think about in design thinking. I hate to keep my second time going there, Eli. I'm sorry.
That's all right. First time with the audience. Go ahead.
First time with the audience. Okay. And so in design thinking, there's a process where you build empathy for who you're designing for. And so if I'm a school and I want fathers more engaged in my school, then I want to have a process where we try to understand what fathers think, what they feel, what they say, what they need, where's their pain, where's their gain. That's in design thinking. That's the way you develop empathy. And that's the first step in designing or innovating for anything, is putting the object of your design squarely centered, fathers, men who are fathers, right? And then start thinking about them deeply, what they need again. And so building empathy, and then leads to innovation, right? How can we innovate to meet this father's needs? So we're going to look at our school and we're going to essentially build empathy. And then we're going to process map what happens when a father walks in our doors. So you get you a pad of Post-it notes and you start writing down and thinking about every single moment of what happens when a father walks in our school's doors, right? How he's greeted, how he's directed, the information he's given. We need to be thinking about how he might be feeling, right? A lot of times fathers engaging with schools is difficult because men work, right? Which is, again, the other myth is that, they don't want to work. These Black fathers don't want to work. So anyway, just thinking about the father as a central figure in a thought process to help you think about what needs to be improved, changed, or created so that fathers are more likely to engage with our school.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, Cassandra, for the question. Here's one from Chip. I am familiar with emerging groups of faith-based African-American men building fraternities of men of hope, men of faith, etc. The idea is to fight isolation and to strengthen their bonds of manhood and fatherhood together. How is the fatherhood movement currently connected to these kinds of Christian-centered men-father building efforts? Is there coordination, indifference? Is there a secular versus sacred or intentional sacred plus secular culture in the service providing space?
Wow.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's a long question, Chip.
Hey, but Chip, look, I grasped some of it, so I'm gonna go with the little piece I got. I see faith and fatherhood mixing organically on its own in programming, right? So having said that, I don't know, I haven't been involved in any direct connection between, okay, the faith-based and the fatherhood sectors intentionally talking and exploring how we can work together and support each other's missions. But throughout my 20 plus years as a fatherhood practitioner, faith and matters of faith are present, are welcome, are often brought in and by the father themselves. And then the space that we provide for these fathers is open and welcoming, right? And so I've seen faith play out in that way, but not for me, not in direct connection with faith-based organizations.
Well, I'll address that. At Urban Light Ministries, which is a faith-based Christian organization, our fatherhood work is actually, we have all that integrated. And for instance, we have a group called Dad's Discussion Group. It's a 1 hour per week gathering of Christian men, and you don't have to be a Christian, but it's open to everyone. But what we attract, are Christian men, and we come together and we have a facilitated conversation about fatherhood and what the Bible teaches about being a parent, being a man, and being a father. So I like the integrated approach. We don't necessarily work with any particular men's group or any particular church. It's a matter of bringing men together and creating a space, a venue for open and honest, difficult conversations around fatherhood, using the Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 13, in fact, as a guide for how we are to love our children and our children's mothers. So Glenn, did you have anything to share on that?
Yeah, I would just add that, me personally, I was born and raised in a Christian faith. And in my early adult years, my mother converted to Islam. So I've got experience in the Islamic faith as well. When it comes to my fatherhood work, I tend to keep the two separate. One, I don't want to alienate anyone that may be in the group if they identify another way. I do a lot of work in prisons and incarcerations with, a lot of different faiths and things of that nature. However, for those that I do know hold a very strong belief, I'm very quick to draw on my knowledge and both Islam and Christianity to bring out points or passages, surahs, or different things of that nature to help different points resonate with the audience. And just like Calvin, absolutely, I think there's a very, very strong connection. There's a Bible verse, John 5, verse 19 and 20. I point to an awful lot in the fatherhood work that I do. And I encourage you to take a look at that.
Yeah. So I think, I think it was Chris who asked the question.
Chip.
Fatherhood programs have been decidedly very, very open, welcoming, and inviting spaces for men wherever they are, whatever journey they're on. I mean, the truly effective, comprehensive fatherhood work starts with loving the men that you are privileged to serve. And so when you're starting from that platform, we want to take men in as they are, who they are, including their beliefs, and absolutely make room whenever that man needs or wants to express or relate something to their beliefs. The room is there. The place is safe so in every fatherhood program I've ever run, that's been the case without being decidedly faith-based. But I told staff at my very first fatherhood program 20-something years ago, the key thing to doing this work is simple. You have to love them. And I would stress that to the staff, and that's the basis for being effective with fathers in your program.
Calvin, if I can, I just want to tell a story really quick to illustrate exactly what you're talking about. I left the Columbus Urban League back in 2014. And I made sure that, all of my client base, all my clientele, they always knew how to get in touch with me. Find me on Facebook, connect with me. I'm here for you anytime that you need me. That's part of that love that Calvin was talking about. Had a very unique experience last summer. In fact, I was out with my kids. We're having breakfast. And one of the dads I had worked with years ago at the Urban League is there with his kids, and he sees me. So he approaches our table with his kids. Oh, Glenn, man, I was so happy to see you. Haven't seen you in years. I still got that job that you got me. I'm a supervisor now. if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be able to be with my kids right now. Because of you, I've got visitation with my kids, blah, blah, blah. And they leave. My youngest kids are 8 years old, and they don't remember my Urban League days. They didn't know that works. They're looking at me like, Dad, what was that all about? Like, why is that dude like praising you like that? So, I shared a little bit, this is what Dad used to do, and I helped him out here and there. So a few moments later, the waitress walked by and I go, hey, can we get our check? And she goes, your check's already been covered. That young man that was just here, he already paid for your check. And we're talking easily a $50, $60 check because I'm there with myself and 3 of my kids. And it was just like, wow, like that's the relationship that we have together. That you're building that camaraderie. These people know that, you have a certain amount of respect, trust, despite whatever, journey they've told you or they've shared with you, that they know that you're not going to judge them by that, and you're going to judge them by the way they move forward. And those relationships I value to this day. I mean, there's countless guys that I'll get an inbox just randomly. Hey, Glenn, such and such just happened. What would you do? I love entertaining those type of messages.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. Gregory Johnson, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself here. You made a comment that I think deserves to be addressed. So if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and addressing the group with your thoughts.
My thoughts? I'm delighted to be here. I am an old school person in the movement, more than 30 years dealing with the fatherhood issue. Many years ago, one of the catalysts for the Fatherhood Commission came through then Senator Peter Lawson Jones, and we worked together on a statewide level and in Cleveland to get the fatherhood movement going. Muqit, he's not here, but we all formed, and I know you know this already about the Healthy Fathering Collaborative in Cleveland. However, we've been at this for a long time, and it's a work of passion for me. But I think sometimes we allow ourselves to get caught up in defending being a father. That's why earlier I came out and I was speaking about being a parent. And just as Calvin mentioned, and I'll kind of toy with his words, we should be the complementary parent to the mother in every situation. We bring different assets to the table, realize what those are, and they're to the benefit of our children. I formed one of the first fatherhood programs in the state that was funded by the state back in 93, 94, titled the Rising Tide Initiative. And that was to help many of us Black fathers who had been labeled as a deadbeat dad. Many of us had heard that before, deadbeat dads. And the system said, we can replace you with $1, so get a job. But we're more interested in your job and the money that you can pay than you as a person that can influence, help shape character, help shape values, and what have you. So that's a small part of my background.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And we're so happy that you are here. Feel free to contribute as much as you would like. We also have with us Gail Fowler. Let's hear a woman's perspective. First of all, she has a question. What do you experience related to race and culture biases and stereotypes related to Black fathers in schools, and how have you addressed it? Glenn or Calvin, would you like to take that? And Gail, go ahead and open your mic in case you have a follow-up.
Glenn, you want to go?
Yeah, Gail, I'll just point to the story I shared a little bit ago about, how I was treated, entering that school building, the line of questions that, I faced as a father. And I just want to, highlight, I had on a business suit. Like, that was a work day for me. I was out in the community doing work. And immediately I thought, well, what if I was a dad who walked in here in Carhartts or, cut off jean shorts, whatever it may be? How would you have treated him? Would you have looked at him as a threat? I think historically, since fathers haven't been invited to the educational process, there's a certain level of, I don't want to call it fear, but it's just the unknown. It's the fear of the unknown. You know, what do they bring to the table? What do they bring to the building? And I think, you know, overwhelmingly, especially locally, we've seen positive outcomes from that, inviting men into the building, invited them to the space. Children are reporting far better outcomes. You know, obviously they get far better grades. Ironically, what I've learned and what I see is that when teachers want to get a response out of students, the first thing they'll say is, well, we're going to contact dad. You know, and that's kind of like how, again, we're seen as the disciplinarian, and not just, you know, a nurturer and all those other things that we can be.
Thank
So
you.
for me, I think about the ways that fathers lose connection with their children, right? So counter to the "they just walked away" myth, what we've learned and operate within in the fatherhood practitioner field is the actual facts, the actual reasons fathers get disconnected from their children. And so it starts with mom's gatekeeping, right? And research just confirms the number one factor for a father's presence and impact in his child's life is mom's attitude about fatherhood. So mom's gatekeeping. Then there's multiple partner fertility, where fathers are having multiple children by multiple women. There's co-parenting, relationship distress. Fathers can be overwhelmed with child support, probation, parole, employment, housing for single men with children is practically non-existent. We talked about the family court bias towards mom as the primary preferred parent. There's shame in fathers themselves generated from their lack of resources, like thinking they have nothing to offer the child, back to that whole idea of like a father is really just a dollar sign. There's lack of knowledge of paternal rights, and there's mental health, something that we don't talk enough about. But gratefully in Ohio, we are now talking about fathers in depression, particularly fathers in postpartum depression. But mental health challenges, addiction, things like that. In that group are systems that have systemic barriers or have systemic issues with Black men and create these disparities, right? So in all these areas where fathers lose connection, you're talking about systems. And it's those systems that apply the race factor to the work that we do, because fathers are being disparaged, mistreated in those systems, right? So racism plays out in fatherhood that way. I would also add that I have lamented over time that the fatherhood field and the work of fatherhood practitioners is not connected to social justice. And that used to bother me, because I was seeing the impact of the lack of social and economic justice in the fathers that come through the door. Now, I came to understand that we don't pay attention to, or we don't make that connection between fatherhood practitioners and social justice, largely because of the way fatherhood programs are funded, right? Most programs are not funded by private family foundations. They're funded by the federal government or the state government. And you do have to be thoughtful, at least, about how you communicate and report out on matters of race, racism, social and economic justice, right? So in other words, you don't have a completely free hand. I mean, your hands aren't really tied, but they're not exactly free either. So a lot of the connection between race, racism, classism, and those type of things is connected to fatherhood through the lives of the men that we serve, right? But I think the field has room to grow into being more overt and outspoken about the connection between what we're seeing, right? I have a friend of mine who says, who's fond of saying that, the entire social service system, and this may be grandiose, but the entire social service system is really designed to ameliorate the effects of white supremacy and racism, right? So that's kind of a way to think about things as racism, racial oppression being a bedrock, right, foundational thing that impacts the men that are walking into our programs.
Thank you, Calvin. Gail, do you have a follow-up, or would you like to give your perspective on this question?
Well, Eli, first, thank you. And I want to thank you for hosting this specifically to address and talk about the voices of Black fathers, because it's critical that we incorporate the social justice element and cultural considerations into this work. So many of the issues that are being addressed are definitely issues related to fathers, fatherhood over the years. And as we look at this climate, and particularly at a time where it's critically needed and maybe have an ear in many cases to address some of these stereotypes, biases, cultural trauma that exists related to our families, and particularly with fathers, is important. So that's why one of the reasons I asked. And Glenn, your story was really one of the reasons that it triggered the question, because that's what I experienced and so many fathers experience. Not like you said, walking into the school, but if you did not have the suit on, they may have thought you were a custodian or something. I mean, that's there. I've seen and observed, I've experienced that happen. I know the challenges my husband had as we were raising my son and going into the school. It was always basically, what do you want? And so it wasn't a family-friendly atmosphere to say, we want to be inclusive of your work, of your voice, your experience, and how you can contribute to this team that wants academic success for your child. And particularly when we look at the broader community, how are we incorporating family-friendly practices into all of the work? Our administration documents, like you said, somebody said things sent home. These documents, policies, and information have still not been updated to address the issue of fathers. So then when we also talk about Black fathers, are they being educated? Somebody just mentioned the word fear. Yes, because we know when we don't have the education, we experience fear. So many of the, and somebody else, I really love some of these comments. Somebody said, well, what we need are Black educators. Yes, that's one of our biggest issues in the school system, is that we don't have Black male educators, but we don't have enough Black educators in front of our children, which is a global issue. Yet I really believe that we need to address what Black fathers experience, because it can be so intimidating and so degrading if you're not prepared for it, and it can trigger. And so then it could contribute to the stereotype that they already had, because what it does, it makes people angry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for your comments. Glenn, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just want to say a little bit something about the systems really quick. So first and foremost, I mean, there are a lot of systems and a lot of legislation that we need to look at as, you know, a society and start to change. A lot of what's out there is designed to, you know, unfortunately break up the Black family. And we go back to some of the laws and things that were placed back in the 60s. I work in the reentry field. There's laws in the books that says, you know, if I come home from incarceration, I got this felony. If mom is on Section 8, I can't be in that house. So that's a something that's in place to intentionally keep me out of that household. And that goes on and on. And when the federal government, especially when it pertains to the Black family, when they say family, really what they mean is women and children. A lot of the policies that you see are all directed, all the agencies for women and children, the father's not really part of that particular circle, part of that loop. So as a society, we've got to go back and say, you know what, maybe we need to look at this and do this a little bit differently. And although we have kind of beat up the systems a little bit today, I do want to lift up some of the partners that we do have, you know, throughout the state. I mean, from the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood, the governor, we've had great support to do this work. We have great leadership. And I think in today's time, today's society with social media and things like that, we have to advocate for leadership that are going to help, you know, change some of these systems, change some of these policies to make this work, you know, a little bit easier, to make it a little less barriers for our Black men and our fathers to navigate. We talk about here in Franklin County, you know, Susan Brown works with Franklin County Child Support. She's been very, very progressive in her thinking. When I started coming up with the fatherhood programming, you know, I came to her and I'm like, you know, how can we work together? She's like, Glenn, you tell me what I can do to change the perception of child support in our community. And kind of sarcastically, almost even jokingly, I'm like, well, you can go downstairs, take down all those wanted posters downstairs in the lobby. That'd be a huge start. And she literally picked up the phone, called the secretary, and said, take down all the wanted posters. I mean, like, people like that in leadership start to change how these systems operate. They start to change how these systems, perceive the Black father.
Thank you for that, Glenn. I want to acknowledge Mike Newsom, who works for Montgomery County, doing good work on behalf of fathers there. Thank you, Mike. Now we're past the 11 o'clock hour. Let's take one more question. This one from Nicole Cobb. And she asks, can you speak to your experience with the impact of early trauma on the ability of fathers you work with to connect emotionally with their children? I'm a mental health clinician working with individuals who bear emotional wounds due to rejection and inability of their fathers to be emotionally present and engaged, and who have gone on to repeat the same cycles with their children. Let me say, we have some very learned experts in this field on the board of Ohio Practitioners Network for Fathers and Families, and probably should have a session that is devoted to this topic. But I'm wondering if Calvin or Glenn, if you would like to address this.
Yeah, I kind of wish Muqit was here, because this is definitely his wheelhouse. He's all about, child welfare and adverse trauma and things of that nature. But I'm actually going to cue Calvin here, and I'm going to share a memory with Calvin. So when I started my journey in this work, Calvin was one of the first guys I reached out to. He had already been doing the work, and there's no point reinventing the wheel. Somebody's already got it. So I reached out to Calvin, and we sat down for 3 days straight, and he kind of helped tutor me, mentor me, and give me some, some background on a curriculum that we use, and it's pretty prevalent throughout the state, called Nurturing Father. The very first chapter of that particular curriculum is called The Father Within. Before we talk about that father and his child, we talk about that father. What are you dealing with? What has been the history of you and your relationship with your dad? What is the baggage that you carry from there? And we are addressing the father first before we can move any forward. Calvin, I'm going to pass it to you and kind of let you pick it up from there.
Yeah, that Nurturing Fathers curriculum was groundbreaking essentially at that time because of that approach, right? And we've made progress. So I think, like, for example, the Talbot House Fatherhood Program, which is a Ohio Commission on Fatherhood funded program, they use the adult adolescent parenting inventory at intake to measure a father's propensity to have the right emotional stance and state to be a father. Now, to be fair, the tool was designed to work as a measurement and prevention tool for child abuse, but it worked well, we found, in the fatherhood field. And then it was adopted by Talbot House as a part of the intake. So there is some attention paid to that in some programs. And I think in Ohio, we're fortunate to have the Ohio Commission on Fatherhood, which it keeps their focus wide with regards to themes and areas that we need to implement in terms of serve fathers. So they have that piece engaged there as well. The trauma that fathers can operate within and unintentionally transfer onto their children. But there's still more work to do. There's still room to grow in this area. We see the trauma coming in the door in these father stories. Like, I do co-parenting coaching, and one of my standard questions for at every initial session is, tell me when and how the relationship began and when and how the relationship ended. In those stories, I've been doing this work for about 7 years, thousands and thousands of stories of sheer trauma. As people talk about these relationships, and you either hear directly or you hear the connection to the trauma they experienced as children or young adults or adolescents that's playing out in their co-parenting relationship 12, 15, 20 years later. So we still have some room to grow in terms of being more overt and intentional. And also, we have to figure an innovative and effective way to do it to uplift this area of mental health, mental well-being, trauma, and its impact on fathers' ability to be the parents they want to be.
Yeah, and As you were speaking, Calvin, I remembered an analogy that James McDonald, another one of our board members with OPNFF, shared with me. And it was that analogy that, think about when you board a flight and you get those pre-flight instructions, and the instructions say, hey, if in the event of, the plane going down, air mask will drop down, please wear the air mask, so on and so forth. Well, in that same analogy as the parent, when we talk about our fathers, if that father and child are on that plane's going down, the natural impulse is you take that mask and you put that mask on your child. You want to save your child's life. But if that father perishes, goes away, who's going to protect it? Who's going to look after that child? Once impact happens, once you land or whatever happens there. So what we are doing in the field is we're putting that mask on the dad. Let's get you to full capability. Let's get you to 100%, so you can be the best dad you can be, because that's going to be the best source for our young people, for our children in our communities.
And Eli, do we have another second?
Go ahead, Calvin.
Okay, I'll be brief. So we did an event here last October and this March, where we had 3 Black physicians engage with fathers in our community. So it was a virtual event that fathers could attend. So 2 of them were psychiatrists, and another was a general practitioner. So after the second event in March, there were about 6 or 7 fathers on the call. And, fathers are engaged, at the level that they're comfortable and all that. The next day after that event, because the event was designed to talk about fathers' mental, emotional, and psychological health. That was the focus of the event. The next day, one of the fathers who attended sent me a 270-word text, right? Detailing how desperate he is for some help with his thinking and his feelings and his mental health. I mean, so to me, that indicates this hidden desire for men to really want to address things that are challenging them in terms of their thinking and feelings. And one of the ways that I just started doing this recently, because I'm just tired of the stigma thing around mental health. And I wrote a little article for my son's website about mental health, and it related to the George Floyd incident. But I'm tired of the stigma. About 4 or 5 weeks ago, I wasn't happy with my thinking and feeling, right? And I reached out, and now I'm currently re-engaged in therapy, right? Now, just saying that, if men have a swollen ankle or a achy knee, we'll describe that and talk about that all day, but we won't talk about this, right? We won't say, man, I'm really not feeling well, and I need to go get some help so I can think and feel better. So the stigma has to be dealt with, and I'm just on a one-man crusade to get that out the way, so that we can deal with these issues that fathers bring, but they have hidden desires or a reluctance to even bring it up because of the stigma.
And we have found also in fatherhood work that often a part of the pain that they're feeling is from their lack of a relationship or a poor relationship with their own fathers. And just as an unexpected or unplanned result of our programming, many of the fathers we work with seek to repair their relationships with their fathers, which is an important step in their own healing and their own ability to be a better parent to their own children. So again, that's an unplanned for blessing that it's always great to see when these men start reaching out to their own fathers who they may not have talked to in years, have held grudges and held on to pain and that sort of thing. So we are out of time. I still think we need to address that issue more, the trauma issue when it comes to fathers, and particularly Black fathers, because the trauma is so deep in many of those cases. I want to thank all of you for participating today. We are appreciating the Gammon House and Urban Light Ministries for providing this programming and the support that has been received from Ohio Commission on Fatherhood. For information about the work of Ohio Commission on Fatherhood, visit their website at fatherhood.ohio.gov, fatherhood.ohio.gov. Again, many thanks to our panelists. fellow board members of OPNFF, Glenn Harris and Calvin Williams. We did hear that Muqit was having technical difficulties, and that is why he was not able to join us. We're grateful for Mark Sturgeon, a board member of Urban Light Ministries, who is taking care of the technical side of this event. Thank you, Mark. It went off without a hitch. We appreciate that. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Pastor Eli Williams saying good afternoon to all and happy Father's Day.